Night settles over the Giza Plateau. The desert cools, the air grows still, and the Great Pyramid looms like a frozen wave of stone. Too vast, too precise, too silent to seem man-made. Beneath its shadow, a question older than civilization itself stirs. Who truly built this? You stand before this monument, and something feels fundamentally wrong. Not wrong in the sense of danger, but wrong in the sense of time itself. As if history has been telling you a story that doesn't match what your eyes are seeing. The limestone blocks rise with mathematical perfection that makes your engineering mind rebel against everything you've been taught about the Bronze Age. Dr. Charles Bradford has felt this cognitive dissonance for 3 decades. As a structural engineer who spent his career analyzing construction tolerances for aerospace manufacturing, he knows precision when he sees it. Components measured to thousandths of an inch, assemblies that must function in the vacuum of space, materials pushed to their absolute limits. This is Bradford's world. When he first ran his laser instruments along the Great Pyramid's base in 2019, the readings made him question not just his equipment, but his entire understanding of ancient capabilities. The foundation deviates from level by less than 2 centimeters across 13 acres, an area large enough to hold 10 football fields. The sides align to true north within 3 arc minutes, a precision that rivals GPS-guided construction. The corners meet at angles so exact that modern contractors would struggle to match them with computer-controlled equipment. These aren't Bronze Age tolerances. These are 21st century standards, achieved somehow 4.5 millennia ago. Bradford remembers the moment when the implications first hit him. Standing in his Denver office, staring at the measurement data spread across his drafting table, he realized he was looking at evidence that shouldn't exist. Either our understanding of ancient Egyptian capabilities is completely wrong, he told his partner that evening, or someone else built this thing. The accepted story seems straightforward enough. Around 2580 BC, during Egypt's 4th dynasty, Pharaoh Khufu supposedly ordered his royal architects to construct a tomb that would secure his passage into the afterlife. The logistics alone sound superhuman. More than 2.3 million blocks, each averaging 2.5 tons, quarried from sites hundreds of kilometers away, then transported and stacked with machine-like precision to a height of 146 meters. Egyptologists estimate tens of thousands of laborers worked for 20 years to complete this mountain of stone. It's a remarkable story of human achievement and royal ambition. But when Bradford began tracing the tale's origins, he discovered something troubling. Most of the narrative rests not on contemporary ancient records, but on modern interpretation mixed with 19th century speculation and, quite possibly, deliberate fraud. The first detailed written description comes from the Greek historian Herodotus, who visited Egypt around 450 BC, roughly 2,000 years after Khufu's supposed reign. Think about that gap. Herodotus was as far removed from the pyramid's alleged construction as we are from the fall of Rome. He never witnessed the building process. He merely repeated stories told by Egyptian priests, tales that included not just engineering accounts of ramps and stone quarries, but also descriptions of winged machines and sacred magic that lifted the massive blocks into place. Modern historians quietly omit these inconvenient supernatural details while building their timelines on Herodotus's second-hand accounts. It's as if future archaeologists tried to understand the construction of the Golden Gate Bridge based solely on tourist stories told 2 millennia later, accepting the plausible parts while dismissing references to great metal birds that carried the workers skyward. This foundation of questionable evidence becomes even shakier when you examine the sole piece of proof that anchors the pyramid to Khufu's reign. In 1837, Colonel Howard Pemberton, a retired British officer obsessed with making a career-defining discovery, brought to Giza not patience or proper archaeological methods, but gunpowder and unbridled ambition. After weeks of blasting through sealed chambers with dynamite, to the horror of his Egyptian workers, Pemberton's team reported finding red-painted marks in a narrow space above what is now called the King's Chamber. Among these crude markings was a cartouche, the oval symbol containing a pharaoh's name, which appeared to read Khufu. It was exactly the missing piece everyone had been waiting for. Pemberton announced he had found the builder's signature, direct evidence that Khufu commissioned the Great Pyramid. Overnight, his discovery made international headlines. The textbooks were rewritten. Egyptology finally had its smoking gun. The case, scholars declared with relief, was definitively closed. Bradford understands the appeal of certainty. In engineering, you need firm foundations before you can build anything that won't collapse. The academic world craved that same stability, and Pemberton's discovery provided exactly what was needed to anchor centuries of speculation. But as Bradford learned long ago, when something seems too convenient to be true, it usually is. Science, when done properly, never closes its case permanently. Bradford learned this principle during his years testing aircraft components, where a single overlooked flaw could mean catastrophic failure at 30,000 feet. So when he first heard about Pemberton's convenient discovery, his instinct was to examine the evidence with the same skepticism he'd apply to a suspicious weld or a stress test that seemed too good to be true. What Bradford found in the historical record made his engineering mind sound alarm bells. Years after Pemberton's announcement, other researchers began noticing troubling details about the Colonel's breakthrough. The red marks were painted, not carved, a significant distinction from the carefully chiseled hieroglyphs found in genuine royal tombs. Some symbols were misspelled, errors that no trained scribe would make, yet they matched exactly the hieroglyphic examples printed in a British reference book that Pemberton owned and frequently consulted. Dr. Hannah Coleman, a geologist specializing in forensic mineral analysis, has studied photographs of these markings with the same intensity she once brought to examining evidence in mining fraud cases. The pigment looked unnaturally bright, she explains, lacking the microcracking and mineral breakdown you'd expect from 4,000-year-old paint exposed to limestone environments. Coleman's analysis revealed something even more damning. Modern spectroscopic examination showed that the red ochre sits on top of quarry marks, the construction guidelines used to align the blocks during original placement. This means the paint was applied after the stones were positioned, not before or during construction. If those markings were genuine artifacts from Khufu's time, they should have been buried beneath millennia of accumulated limestone dust, calcification, and mineral deposits. Instead, they gleamed above these natural accumulation layers like fresh graffiti. But Pemberton's proof was too convenient for the academic establishment to question seriously. His claim resolved centuries of uncertainty and gave Egyptology the solid foundation it desperately needed. From that moment forward, everything else, the dating methods, the engineering analyses, the cultural interpretations, was built upon that fragile cornerstone of painted evidence. Bradford knows how institutional momentum works. In aerospace engineering, once a design specification becomes accepted, it takes overwhelming evidence to challenge it. Careers are built on established parameters. Funding depends on accepted baselines. The same dynamics operate in archaeology, where Pemberton's discovery became the unquestionable anchor point for an entire chronological system. When later researchers searched for corroborating evidence of Khufu's involvement, they found a troubling vacuum. No papyrus scrolls from his reign describe the construction project. No wall paintings depict the workers, tools, or techniques used. No contemporary inscriptions celebrate the achievement. Even Khufu's own statue, discovered at Abydos, is remarkably tiny. Barely 10 centimeters tall, the smallest representation of any pharaoh supposedly responsible for such a monumental construction project. For an engineering mind like Bradford's, this archaeological silence is deafening. Imagine if we found the Golden Gate Bridge, he often tells colleagues, but there were no construction photographs, no engineering drawings, no worker testimonies, no contemporary newspaper accounts. Wouldn't that strike you as suspicious? Dr. Preston Lansford, a carbon dating specialist who has spent 15 years analyzing organic materials from ancient sites, brings another perspective to the mystery. When scholars point to the so-called pyramid workers' village discovered in the 1990s as proof of the official timeline, Lansford sees a more complex picture. The site does indeed show evidence of large-scale occupation, but radiocarbon dates from pottery sherds, animal bones, and charcoal samples span several centuries rather than the 20-year construction period the textbooks describe. The evidence tells us about maintenance, restoration, and ritual activity, Lansford explains, but it doesn't necessarily prove original construction. It's like finding a caretaker's cottage next to an ancient cathedral. It tells you the building was maintained, not when it was first built. Even the geological evidence challenges the conventional timeline. Coleman has analyzed erosion patterns along the pyramid's base and the nearby Sphinx enclosure, finding deep vertical channels carved into the limestone that run perpendicular to prevailing wind patterns. These channels match exactly what water runoff creates over centuries of heavy rainfall that ended in the Sahara region around 5000 BC, when the desert transformed from green savanna to the arid landscape we know today. This observation aligns with climate data from sediment cores taken throughout the Nile Valley. The cores reveal high flood layers dating back more than 7,000 years, when the region experienced dramatically different weather patterns. If the pyramid shows water erosion from that wetter era, its foundation could predate Egypt's recorded dynasties by millennia. Bradford often returns to a fundamental question that drives his investigation. Why would the precision decline so dramatically in later pyramids if the Egyptians had mastered these techniques during Khufu's reign? Every subsequent pyramid shows less stability, less alignment, and less sophisticated engineering. The normal trajectory of technology moves from crude early attempts toward refined mastery, but at Giza, perfection appears first and degrades afterward. This pattern of declining precision suggests inheritance rather than invention. That the Great Pyramid represents not humanity's first great engineering achievement, but the last remnant of capabilities that were already ancient when the Egyptians found them. Bradford has seen this phenomenon in reverse during his aerospace career, watching as engineers gradually improved manufacturing tolerances through decades of iteration. At Giza, the evidence points to a lost peak of achievement that later civilizations could only approximate. The engineering impossibilities multiply when you examine the construction details through a modern technical lens. Bradford's analysis reveals tolerances that would challenge contemporary contractors equipped with laser-guided equipment and GPS positioning systems. Some interior joints are fitted so precisely that air cannot pass between them. Granite blocks weighing up to 80 tons are positioned with clearances measured in fractions of millimeters. Under magnification, tool marks on these granite surfaces tell their own story of impossibility. Bradford has examined similar spiral striations in his aerospace work, the signature of rotary drilling equipment operating at thousands of revolutions per minute. The feed rate visible in these ancient marks suggests cutting speeds and applied pressures far beyond what human operators could maintain with hand tools. We use diamond-tipped carbide bits rotating at 3,000 RPM to create similar patterns in modern granite fabrication, Bradford explains to colleagues who question his conclusions. Copper tools, which measure only 3 on the Mohs hardness scale against granite's 6 to 7, would bend before they could scratch the surface meaningfully. The mathematics of material science don't change because we're looking at ancient artifacts. Experimental archaeology has repeatedly confirmed Bradford's assessment. In 1978, a Japanese television crew attempted to build a 20-meter replica pyramid using only materials supposedly available to 4th Dynasty workers. Despite unlimited time and funding, their project reached only half its intended height before the team abandoned traditional methods and resorted to steel tools and diesel-powered cranes just to lift the smaller blocks. The official report, quietly filed away and rarely cited, concluded that no known ancient technique could account for the precision or scale of the Great Pyramid's construction. Yet someone built it with tolerances that still impress modern engineers. Dr. Preston Lansford experienced his own moment of cognitive dissonance in 2020 when a long-lost artifact finally received the carbon dating analysis that academia had been avoiding for decades. A curator at the University of Aberdeen, while cataloging old donations, discovered a small cigar box wrapped in 1946 newspaper. Inside lay a fragment of cedar wood, dark and dry, carved into a rod-like shape. A faded label read, "From the Great Pyramid, Dixon Relics." This wasn't ordinary museum debris. In 1872, British engineer Wayneman Dixon had discovered 3 objects in one of the pyramid's hidden shafts: a granite ball, a bronze hook, and this cedar fragment. The first 2 items ended up in the British Museum. The wooden piece had vanished for nearly 150 years. When Lansford subjected the cedar fragment to radiocarbon analysis, the results challenged everything he thought he understood about ancient Egyptian chronology. The wood dated to 3240 BC, 5 to 8 centuries older than Khufu's supposed lifetime, older even than Egypt's first recognized pharaohs. Lansford had expected the dating to confirm the orthodox timeline, providing one more piece of supporting evidence for the 4th Dynasty construction theory. Instead, he found himself staring at laboratory results that placed organic material from inside the pyramid's structure in an era before Egyptian civilization, as we know it, had begun. The explanations came quickly from academic colleagues. Ancient cedar trees could live for centuries, they argued, so the wood might have been old when used. Others suggested contamination or measurement error. But Lansford understood the implications of what he was seeing. This was the only direct organic artifact ever recovered from inside the pyramid structure, and it predated the monument's supposed builder by half a millennium. Bradford recognizes the pattern from his own field. When test data contradict established specifications, engineers don't dismiss the measurements. They investigate the assumptions. But archaeology operates differently. Inconvenient evidence gets explained away rather than integrated into new theories. Coleman's geological analysis adds another layer to the chronological mystery. Her examination of limestone weathering patterns throughout the Giza complex reveals exposure to environmental conditions that haven't existed in the region for thousands of years. Deep vertical channels carved into the stone foundations match the signature of sustained water erosion, not the wind-blown sand that has dominated the area since the Sahara's transformation into desert around 5000 BC. The 3 experts, Bradford the engineer, Lansford the chronologist, and Coleman the geologist, represent different scientific disciplines, yet their independent investigations converge on the same troubling conclusion. The Great Pyramid contains evidence of construction techniques, material dating, and environmental exposure that predate ancient Egyptian civilization by millennia. You begin to see how the pieces fit together into a picture that academic orthodoxy cannot accommodate. Every hard measurement, every scientific analysis, every engineering assessment points toward an origin far older than the textbooks allow. If Khufu didn't build the Great Pyramid, then the monument becomes something far more mysterious, a technological achievement from a forgotten epoch. The mathematics embedded within the Great Pyramid structure tell a story that should be impossible for any Bronze Age civilization to write. Bradford first noticed the numerical relationships during his precision surveys, but it was his collaboration with Dr. Sarah Kellerman, a mathematician specializing in ancient computational systems, that revealed the full scope of encoded knowledge. When Kellerman calculated the ratio of the pyramid's base perimeter to twice its height, she discovered something that made her question everything she understood about the development of mathematical constants. The result equals pi 3.14159, accurate to 4 decimal places. The same universal constant that defines the relationship between a circle's circumference and its diameter appears perfectly embedded in a structure composed entirely of straight lines and flat surfaces. The precision is extraordinary, Kellerman explains, her voice carrying the wonder of someone who has spent years studying mathematical history. The earliest known written approximation of pi appears in the Rhind mathematical papyrus, dated to 1650 BC, a full 1,000 years after Khufu's supposed reign, and even then it was only an estimate of 316. Yet here, we have the true value encoded in stone with an accuracy that wouldn't be achieved in written mathematics for another 2 millennia. Bradford understands the implications. In engineering, such precision doesn't happen by accident. Every decimal place requires intentional calculation and deliberate implementation. The builders didn't stumble into pi through practical construction needs. They possessed mathematical knowledge that orthodox history claims didn't exist until much later. The golden ratio provides another impossible puzzle. When Kellerman divided the pyramid's slant height by half its base measurement, the result yielded phi 1.618, the same proportion that governs spirals in nautilus shells, the arrangement of seeds in sunflowers, and the structure of galaxies. The builders somehow fused pi and phi, the mathematics of circles and spirals, infinity and growth, into a single architectural statement. Even more remarkably, the pyramid appears to encode knowledge of Earth's physical dimensions with stunning accuracy. When Bradford multiplied the monument's height by 43,200, he got 6,378,000 meters, Earth's polar radius. Multiplying the base perimeter by the same number yielded 40,075,000 meters, the planet's equatorial circumference. Dr. James Wellington, an archaeoastronomer who has studied ancient observational techniques across multiple civilizations, finds these relationships particularly intriguing. The number 43,200 isn't arbitrary, he points out. It's precisely 100 times 432, which appears in ancient measurement systems worldwide. More significantly, it's exactly half of 86,400, the number of seconds in a day. The builders encoded not just Earth's size, but the rhythm of its rotation. To achieve such precision, the ancient architects would have needed accurate knowledge of Earth as a sphere and precise measurement of its dimensions, understanding officially attributed to Eratosthenes in 240 BC, more than 2,000 years after the pyramid's supposed construction. They would also have required surveying instruments capable of measuring vast distances and sophisticated mathematical methods for calculating planetary circumference. Wellington's astronomical analysis reveals another layer of impossible knowledge. The pyramid's orientation to true north deviates by less than 3 arc minutes, a precision that requires understanding of axial precession, the slow wobble of Earth's rotation that changes the position of celestial poles over thousands of years. This phenomenon wasn't scientifically recognized until Hipparchus discovered it in 130 BC, yet the pyramid builders compensated for it with remarkable accuracy. The monument's internal structure continues the pattern of encoded sophistication. Bradford's acoustic analysis of the king's chamber revealed dimensions that create specific resonant frequencies when sound is introduced. The chamber measures 10 cubits wide, 20 long, and 11 high, proportions that generate standing waves at 440 and 432 Hz, frequencies that correspond to modern concert pitch and Earth's natural electromagnetic resonance. This isn't coincidental, Bradford emphasizes to skeptics who suggest these relationships might be accidental. In precision manufacturing, we understand that form follows function. Every dimension, every angle serves a specific purpose. The pyramid's builders understood that geometry affects acoustics, that mathematical ratios influence resonance, and that physical structures can be tuned like musical instruments. Coleman's geological surveys have revealed that similar resonant properties exist throughout the Giza complex. Underground chambers carved directly into bedrock produce identical low-frequency vibrations when subjected to acoustic testing. The entire plateau seems designed as an integrated system where sound, stone, and space interact according to principles that modern engineering is only beginning to understand. Lansford's chronological investigations have uncovered references in ancient Egyptian texts that support the idea of inherited rather than invented knowledge. Priestly records from Saqqara describe plans of the ancestors and records of the first time, suggesting that blueprints for these monuments were preserved from an earlier epoch rather than created during the Fourth Dynasty. The convergence of mathematical, astronomical, geological, and historical evidence creates a picture that orthodox archaeology cannot easily accommodate. Every scientific discipline that examines the Great Pyramid discovers capabilities that shouldn't exist in the Bronze Age, knowledge that predates its supposed discovery by millennia, and precision that challenges modern engineering. Wellington's astronomical investigations reveal perhaps the most compelling evidence for the pyramid's extreme antiquity. When he mapped the monument's internal shaft alignments against historical star positions, accounting for the slow drift of axial precession, he discovered something that fundamentally challenges the accepted timeline. The southern shaft from the king's chamber points directly toward Orion's belt, while the northern shaft targets the pole star position. Meanwhile, shafts from the queen's chamber align with Sirius and Ursa Minor. These aren't approximate orientations. They're precision alignments that required sophisticated understanding of stellar mechanics and long-term astronomical observation. But here's what makes Wellington's discovery revolutionary. When he calculated backwards through thousands of years of precession to find when these alignments would have been most precise, the optimal date falls around 10,500 BC, not the 2580 BC of Khufu's supposed reign. Precession is like a cosmic clock, Wellington explains to colleagues who struggle with the implications. Earth's rotational axis wobbles through a complete cycle every 25,120 years, slowly changing where stars appear in the sky. The pyramid's shaft alignments point to a specific moment in this cycle, and that moment occurred 7,000 years before Orthodox Egyptian history even begins. Bradford finds this astronomical evidence particularly compelling because it demonstrates the same precision mindset he recognizes from aerospace engineering. The builders didn't just observe stars, they calculated their positions across millennia and encoded those calculations in permanent stone. This requires not only advanced mathematical ability, but also cultural continuity spanning thousands of years of observation and record-keeping. The stellar alignments connect to Egyptian mythology in ways that support Wellington's chronological conclusions. Ancient texts describe Orion as Sahu, the soul of Osiris, god of death and rebirth. The pyramid's southern shafts were believed to provide pathways for the pharaoh's spirit to travel along stellar highways toward the realm of Osiris. But if the shafts target a 10,500 BC star configuration, it suggests the mythology preserves memory of an actual historical period when this celestial arrangement held special significance. Coleman's geological work provides additional support for this ancient dating. Her analysis of groundwater patterns beneath the Giza Plateau reveals evidence of massive flooding that correlates with global sea level changes at the end of the last ice age, precisely the period when Wellington's star alignments were perfect. We're seeing convergent evidence from multiple scientific disciplines, Bradford observes, recognizing the pattern from engineering projects where different measurement systems must align to validate design specifications. Astronomy points to 10,500 BC. Geology shows flooding from the same period, and the precision requirements exceed capabilities that supposedly didn't exist until the modern era. Lansford's chronological research has uncovered additional artifacts that support this extended timeline. In museum collections worldwide, he has identified objects attributed to pre-dynastic Egypt that display the same impossible precision found at Giza. Granite vessels with interior angles meeting at perfect right angles, verified by modern laser measurement tools. Stone boxes cut from single blocks, with surfaces flat to within 1/10,000th of an inch, a standard used today in aerospace manufacturing. These artifacts are attributed to dynasties that supposedly lacked iron tools or precision measuring instruments, Lansford notes, his voice carrying the frustration of someone whose data contradicts established academic consensus. Yet they demonstrate manufacturing capabilities that would challenge modern machine shops. The picture emerging from their combined investigations suggests a civilization that possessed advanced knowledge of mathematics, astronomy, geology, and engineering. Knowledge that was somehow preserved through a period of global catastrophe and cultural disruption, then partially recovered by later Egyptian dynasties who inherited and maintained these monuments without fully understanding their original purpose or methods of construction. Bradford often returns to a fundamental principle from his engineering career. When multiple independent measurement systems all point toward the same conclusion, that conclusion deserves serious consideration, regardless of how it challenges existing theories. At Giza, precision engineering, astronomical alignments, geological evidence, and chronological artifacts all indicate construction during an epoch far older than academic orthodoxy allows. Wellington's analysis of global megalithic sites reveals similar patterns of ancient astronomical knowledge. The temples of Angkor Wat in Cambodia align with precessional cycles spanning 25,920 years. Newgrange in Ireland precisely tracks winter solstice sunrise after 5,000 years. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, now dated to nearly 12,000 years ago, displays sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics that predates supposed invention of agriculture. We're seeing the same astronomical knowledge preserved in stone monuments across continents, Wellington explains. Either these represent parallel evolution of identical capabilities, or they're remnants of a knowledge system that once spanned the globe and survived in scattered locations after some kind of civilizational collapse. Coleman's geological investigations support the collapse scenario. Evidence of massive flooding, rapid climate change, and environmental disruption appears in sediment cores worldwide around 12,800 years ago, correlating with the beginning of the Younger Dryas period, a time of global cooling, sea level changes, and widespread extinction events that would have devastated any existing civilization. The Great Pyramid, viewed through this lens, becomes something far more significant than a pharaoh's tomb. It becomes a monument of preservation, a technological time capsule designed to outlast whatever catastrophe its builders foresaw approaching. Bradford's engineering perspective illuminates this possibility in ways that pure archaeological analysis cannot. If you needed to preserve crucial knowledge through a global disaster that might destroy libraries, cities, and civilizations, what medium would you choose? Stone endures where paper burns and metal corrodes. Mathematical relationships encoded in architectural proportions survive when written records perish. Astronomical alignments continue functioning even when the civilization that created them has vanished. The Great Pyramid, viewed as an information storage system rather than a tomb, represents perhaps the most sophisticated data preservation technology ever devised. Recent discoveries have begun revealing just how much information the monument might contain. In 2017, the Scan Pyramids project, using cosmic ray muon tomography, detected a massive hidden void above the Grand Gallery. Dr. Mehdi Tayyubi, the project's co-director, describes it as a chamber at least 30 meters long, deliberately constructed and sealed for millennia. Bradford understands the implications of this discovery from his experience with classified aerospace projects. You don't build hidden chambers unless you're hiding something valuable, he points out to colleagues still skeptical about the pyramid's true purpose. And you don't seal them for 4,000 years unless you expect whatever's inside to remain relevant for a very long time. Wellington's analysis of the hidden chamber's position reveals yet another layer of astronomical sophistication. The void sits at precisely the same angle as the Grand Gallery below, creating a symmetrical geometry that mirrors the pyramid's external slope. This parallel suggests the chamber wasn't a construction accident or structural necessity, but an intentional component of a larger design. Coleman's geological surveys around the chamber's projected location have detected subtle gravitational anomalies consistent with a hollow space containing low-density materials. If there are artifacts or records inside, she speculates, they're likely made from materials designed to survive extended isolation. Perhaps stone tablets, crystalline storage media, or metal alloys we haven't yet identified. Ground-penetrating radar surveys have revealed even more extensive hidden features. Lansford's analysis of the data shows linear patterns beneath the Giza Plateau that form grid-like networks extending far beyond the visible monuments. These aren't natural geological features, but engineered structures, corridors, chambers, and installations that suggest the surface pyramids are only the visible portion of a much larger complex. We're looking at what appears to be a three-dimensional information storage system, Lansford explains, his voice carrying the excitement of someone who has spent years assembling pieces of an enormous puzzle. The surface monuments encode astronomical and mathematical data in their geometry, while the subsurface network potentially contains more detailed records preserved in controlled environments. Bradford has studied similar designs in modern data centers, where critical information is distributed across multiple storage systems with different access protocols. The pyramid complex seems to follow the same principle: layered preservation, methods ensuring that crucial knowledge remains accessible even if some storage systems fail or become inaccessible. The acoustic properties Bradford discovered in the King's Chamber support this information preservation theory. The resonant frequencies that the chamber produces at 440 and 432 Hz aren't just harmonic curiosities. They're precisely the tones that induce altered states of consciousness in human subjects. Modern neuroscience has confirmed that specific sound frequencies can trigger enhanced memory formation, increased pattern recognition, and expanded awareness. If the chamber was designed as a knowledge transfer interface, Bradford theorizes, the acoustic properties would help human subjects absorb and retain complex information more effectively. It's like an ancient version of accelerated learning technology. Wellington's research into similar chambers at other ancient sites has revealed comparable acoustic signatures. The underground Serapeum at Saqqara, with its massive granite sarcophagi, resonates at nearly identical frequencies. Chambers beneath the temples at Abydos produce the same low-frequency standing waves. The consistency suggests these sites were part of a coordinated knowledge preservation network, rather than isolated religious centers. Coleman's analysis of the granite used throughout these complexes reveals another layer of technological sophistication. The stone contains high concentrations of quartz and feldspar, minerals with piezoelectric properties that generate electrical charges when subjected to mechanical stress or acoustic vibration. Combined with the chamber's resonant frequencies, this creates conditions where the stone itself becomes electronically active. We might be looking at an ancient form of solid-state data storage, Coleman suggests, her geological training providing insights that traditional archaeology misses. Crystalline matrices in the granite could theoretically hold information in the form of molecular arrangements, accessible through specific acoustic or electromagnetic stimulation. The implications extend far beyond academic curiosity. If the hidden chambers and tunnel networks contain preserved records from a pre-flood civilization, they might hold solutions to problems that modern science is still struggling to solve. Advanced materials science, sustainable energy systems, ecological management techniques developed during Earth's last period of major climate change. Lansford's chronological research has identified similar knowledge preservation efforts in other ancient cultures. Sumerian texts describe the Apkallu, wise beings who preserved crucial information before the flood destroyed their civilization. Sanskrit texts detail underground repositories where ancient wisdom was hidden from successive waves of destruction. The consistency of these accounts across cultures suggests a real historical pattern rather than mythological coincidence. The evidence for such a global catastrophe exists not just in ancient texts, but in Earth's geological record itself. Coleman's analysis of sediment cores from around the world reveals a consistent pattern of disruption around 12,800 years ago. Layers of platinum, nanodiamonds, and glass spherules appear in strata from North America to the Middle East, the chemical signature of massive cosmic impact events. What we're seeing is evidence of a civilization-ending catastrophe, Coleman explains, her geological expertise providing the hard data that supports what ancient myths have been saying for millennia. Sea levels rose more than 120 meters in a matter of centuries. Entire coastlines vanished. Any civilization that existed before this event would have seen its cities drowned, its agricultural systems destroyed, its accumulated knowledge scattered to surviving populations in highland refuges. Bradford recognizes this pattern from his studies of system failure in aerospace engineering. When catastrophic failure occurs, only the most robust backup systems survive. If an advanced civilization faced such a global disaster, its survivors would naturally prioritize preserving the most critical knowledge in the most durable possible format. Exactly what the Great Pyramid appears to represent. Wellington's research into the astronomical alignments provides a timeline that matches Coleman's geological evidence. The Orion correlation points to 10,500 BC, roughly in the middle of the Younger Dryas period when global climate was undergoing rapid, dramatic changes. The builders chose to encode this specific moment in stone, perhaps because it marked either the peak of their civilization or the beginning of its end. They weren't just recording star positions, Wellington observes, his voice carrying the weight of someone who has spent years contemplating the implications of his discoveries. They were creating a temporal marker, a way for future civilizations to understand when this knowledge was preserved, and why it was considered important enough to encode in the world's most precisely engineered structure. Lansford's chronological analysis reveals that similar temporal markers appear in other ancient monuments worldwide. The Mayan calendar system, with its precise tracking of long cycles ending in 2012, pointed to astronomical alignments that occur only once every 25,120 years, the same precessional cycle encoded at Giza. The builders of Göbekli Tepe buried their site around 8000 BC, apparently marking the end of one era and the beginning of another. We're seeing evidence of civilizations that understood time on scales we can barely comprehend, Lansford explains. They thought in terms of cosmic cycles, planning preservation strategies that would function across multiple rises and falls of human culture. The Great Pyramid isn't just ancient, it's designed to be eternal. This perspective transforms how Bradford understands the monument's impossible precision. The tolerances that challenge modern engineering weren't achieved for aesthetic reasons or religious symbolism. They were necessary to ensure the structure could survive multiple cycles of civilizational collapse and renewal, preserving its encoded information through whatever catastrophes might come. The acoustic properties Bradford discovered in the King's Chamber support this long-term preservation strategy. The resonant frequencies that affect human consciousness weren't designed for the builders' contemporaries. They were calibrated for whoever might rediscover the chamber thousands of years later, providing a direct interface between ancient knowledge and future minds capable of understanding it. Coleman's geological surveys have revealed that the entire Giza Plateau shows evidence of careful site selection based on seismic stability and flood resistance. The builders chose bedrock formations that could withstand earthquake activity and positioned their monuments above ancient high-water marks, ensuring survival through multiple cycles of climate change. This wasn't just architecture, Coleman emphasizes, her scientific training helping her see patterns that pure archaeological analysis might miss. This was geological engineering on a scale we're only beginning to appreciate. They understood Earth's dynamic systems well enough to predict what would endure and what would be destroyed over timescales of millennia. Wellington's analysis of global megalithic sites reveals that this long-term thinking appears in ancient monuments worldwide. Stonehenge, Newgrange, Machu Picchu, Angkor Wat all demonstrate astronomical knowledge combined with engineering precision that suggests their builders understood civilization's cyclical nature and planned accordingly. The pattern suggests a prehistoric global culture that possessed advanced scientific knowledge and used it to create preservation networks spanning continents. When catastrophe struck, these monuments served as beacons for survivors, encoding the essential knowledge needed to restart technological civilization. Bradford often contemplates what this means for modern society. If our analysis is correct, we're living in a recovery phase following the last cycle of collapse. The ancient knowledge preservation systems are still functioning, still transmitting information to anyone with the scientific literacy to receive it. The question is whether we're wise enough to learn from what they preserved. The hidden chambers detected by muon tomography may contain the most detailed records from this lost civilization. Access to these sealed spaces could revolutionize our understanding not just of ancient history, but of human potential itself. The technologies that created the Great Pyramid's impossible precision might offer solutions to problems that modern science is still struggling to solve. Lansford's research into ancient flood narratives from around the world reveals remarkable consistency in describing the preservation of knowledge through global catastrophe. From the Sumerian Gilgamesh epic to Hindu Puranas to biblical accounts, the same pattern emerges. Wise individuals foreseeing disaster and taking measures to preserve civilization's most important achievements for future generations. The consistency of these preservation narratives across isolated cultures suggests they're not mythological inventions, but ancestral memories of real events. Bradford sees this pattern recognition as fundamental to engineering problem-solving. When independent data sources all point towards the same conclusion, that conclusion deserves serious investigation, regardless of how it challenges established assumptions. Modern attempts to access the hidden chambers have met with institutional resistance that Bradford finds troubling from a scientific perspective. When the Scan Pyramids team requested permission to drill exploratory holes into the detected void, Egypt's Ministry of Antiquities denied access, citing preservation concerns. Similar restrictions have blocked investigation of the tunnel networks beneath the plateau and the anomalous chambers detected near the Sphinx. In aerospace engineering, when we detect structural anomalies, we investigate them immediately, Bradford explains to colleagues frustrated by the bureaucratic obstacles. Lives depend on understanding what we're seeing. Here, we might be looking at information that could transform our understanding of human capabilities, yet institutional inertia prevents us from examining the evidence. Wellington's analysis suggests that timing might be crucial for accessing these hidden repositories. The astronomical alignments that pointed to 10,500 BC are approaching a similar configuration again as Earth's precessional cycle continues. If the builders designed their preservation system to activate at specific celestial moments, the current era might represent the intended time for rediscovery. Ancient texts often describe knowledge being revealed when the time is right or when the stars return. Wellington notes, his astronomical expertise providing context for seemingly mystical language. We might be approaching the astronomical conditions that the original builders considered optimal for accessing their preserved information. Coleman's geological investigations have identified potential entry points to the subsurface network that could be accessed without damaging the surface monuments. Natural limestone fissures and ancient water channels provide pathways that modern exploration technology could follow to reach the hidden chambers while preserving the integrity of the pyramid structure above. The technological implications of what might be preserved in these chambers extend far beyond historical curiosity. Lansford's research into ancient metallurgical techniques has uncovered evidence of alloys and manufacturing processes that modern materials science is only beginning to understand. If the hidden repositories contain detailed technical information from a civilization that achieved the precision visible at Giza, the knowledge could revolutionize fields from architecture to energy production. Bradford often contemplates the parallels between ancient preservation strategies and modern data storage challenges. We're struggling now with how to preserve critical information for future generations: nuclear waste warnings, climate data, technological specifications. The pyramid builders faced the same challenge on a civilizational scale and solved it using physics and mathematics that we're still trying to fully comprehend. The acoustic properties of the King's Chamber provide another tantalizing clue about access protocols. Bradford's measurements show that the resonant frequencies change subtly depending on atmospheric conditions, humidity levels, and even the position of celestial bodies. If the chamber was designed as an interface for accessing preserved knowledge, these acoustic variations might serve as a kind of combination lock, ensuring that information is released only when specific conditions are met. Wellington's astronomical calculations predict that the next optimal alignment, when Orion's position matches the pyramid's shaft orientations, will occur within the next few decades. The convergence of advanced detection technology, improved understanding of the monument's design principles, and approaching astronomical conditions suggests this generation might be the first since the original builders to possess both the capability and the timing necessary to unlock the preservation system. Coleman's analysis of environmental conditions within the detected chambers shows remarkably stable temperature and humidity levels that could preserve organic materials for millennia. We might be looking at the world's oldest intact library, she speculates, her scientific excitement barely contained by professional caution. Documents, artifacts, maybe even technological devices preserved in controlled conditions since before recorded history began. The implications for modern civilization are profound. If Bradford's analysis is correct, we're living through a recovery phase following the last cycle of global catastrophe. The knowledge preserved in the hidden chambers might contain solutions to problems we haven't yet learned to solve. Sustainable energy systems, advanced materials, ecological management techniques developed by a civilization that successfully navigated previous periods of climate change. Lansford's chronological research suggests that we're approaching a critical decision point. The builders preserved this knowledge for a reason, he observes, his years of studying ancient timekeeping systems providing insight into their long-term thinking. They understood something about cyclical patterns in human civilization that we're only beginning to recognize. Dantor, question is whether we're ready to receive what they preserved. Bradford recognizes this moment from his engineering career, the point where theoretical analysis must transition to practical application. All the evidence points toward the Great Pyramid, containing preserved knowledge from a lost civilization. The technology exists to access the hidden chambers safely. The astronomical timing is approaching optimal conditions. The only remaining variable is human readiness to accept discoveries that might fundamentally change our understanding of who we are and what we're capable of achieving. The Great Pyramid stands in the desert darkness, patient as geology itself, holding its secrets while humanity slowly develops the wisdom to receive them. Bradford often returns to Giza at night, when the tourist crowds have vanished, and the monument reveals its true character, not as a tourist attraction or archaeological curiosity, but as a beacon across time, a message from minds that understood scales of thinking we're only beginning to comprehend. Standing beneath those precisely cut stones, you begin to understand that this isn't just about ancient history. It's about human potential itself. If a prehistoric civilization could achieve the mathematical precision, astronomical knowledge, and engineering capabilities visible at Giza, then our species possesses capacities that orthodox history has systematically underestimated. Wellington's final calculations show that the next optimal astronomical alignment will peak in 2047, when Orion's position precisely matches the pyramid's internal shaft orientations for the first time since the monument's construction. The builders, thinking in cosmic timescales, may have intended this moment as the designated time for accessing their preserved knowledge. Coleman's geological projections indicate that climate patterns are shifting toward conditions similar to those that existed during the Younger Dryas period: rising sea levels, increasingly unstable weather systems, environmental pressures that could again challenge human civilization's continuity. If the ancient builders faced similar circumstances and successfully preserved crucial knowledge through the crisis, their information repositories might contain solutions that modern science desperately needs. We're approaching a convergence point, Lansford observes, his chronological research revealing patterns that extend far beyond individual lifespans. Advanced detection capability, optimal astronomical timing, environmental conditions that mirror the original preservation context, and a global civilization that's finally sophisticated enough to understand what the builders were trying to preserve. Bradford's engineering perspective provides the practical framework for moving forward. The technology exists to access the hidden chambers safely using non-invasive techniques that could preserve both the monuments and whatever they contain. Robotic, Exploration systems could navigate the subsurface networks without human presence, documenting discoveries and retrieving samples for analysis. The engineering challenges are solvable. The remaining obstacles are institutional, political, and psychological. The resistance to investigation that Bradford encounters reflects deeper human reluctance to confront possibilities that challenge fundamental assumptions about our past and future. If the Great Pyramid contains evidence of capabilities that exceed our current achievements, it forces uncomfortable questions about the trajectory of human development and the nature of progress itself. Yet the evidence continues accumulating regardless of institutional comfort levels. Each new measurement, each scientific analysis, each technological advancement that reveals previously hidden aspects of the monument adds weight to the conclusion that Orthodox history has misunderstood both the pyramid's origins and its purpose. The acoustic properties of the King's Chamber offer another pathway for investigation that requires no physical intervention. Bradford's team has begun developing audio analysis protocols that could potentially activate whatever information systems the original builders embedded in the structure. If the resonant frequencies serve as access keys to preserved knowledge, the chamber might literally speak to those who understand its language. Wellington's research into global megalithic sites has revealed similar acoustic signatures at monuments worldwide, suggesting a coordinated preservation network that spans continents. The knowledge encoded at Giza might represent only one component of a larger information system, designed to guide human civilization through predictable cycles of crisis and renewal. Coleman's geological analysis indicates that the preservation systems remain functional after 12 millennia of environmental exposure. The hidden chambers show no signs of structural compromise, the acoustic properties remain precisely tuned, and the astronomical alignments continue tracking celestial mechanics with unwavering accuracy. Whatever the builders intended to preserve has survived intact, waiting for minds capable of understanding its significance. The implications extend beyond historical revision or technological advancement. If human civilization has achieved sophisticated capabilities before and lost them to catastrophic events, then our current trajectory isn't necessarily linear progress toward unprecedented achievements. We might be recovering capacities that our species once possessed, climbing back toward heights that ancient minds had already reached. This perspective transforms the Great Pyramid from a monument to the dead into a beacon for the living. A repository of human potential preserved across the darkest periods of our species' journey. The mathematical constants encoded in its geometry, the astronomical knowledge embedded in its alignments, the engineering precision visible in its construction, all serve as reminders of what consciousness can achieve when it operates at its highest capabilities. You stand in the shadow of this achievement as dawn approaches over the Giza Plateau. The desert begins to warm, the air starts to stir, and light slowly climbs the pyramid's eastern face, illuminating the same mathematical angles that have greeted every sunrise for thousands of years. The monument endures, patient and precise, holding its knowledge until humanity develops sufficient wisdom to receive it safely. Perhaps that moment approaches with each generation that learns to think in larger scales, to preserve knowledge across longer timescales, to recognize that human consciousness itself might be the most sophisticated technology our species has ever developed. The pyramid waits, as it has always waited, for minds ready to remember what we once knew and capable of building what we might become.